a clap by from the hilarious Mr. Jimmy Gallagher, folks. Let him hear it. Well, he might be funny, but he's kind of an inconsiderate dick, if you ask me. Well, folks, as I said, my name is Jimmy Gallagher. No doubt most of you recognize me from my earlier work where I brought food to your table. That's career is going really well, as you can tell. Pointing to the restrooms on the left, please be care to take good care in there as well. I'll be cleaning those at the end of the night as well. So, Gallagher is an Irish name. Always been grateful to have an Irish name. It does a good job of covering up all the Polack blood. Not that I'm ashamed of being Polish, it just sucks when you're Irish and Polish. Everybody assumes you're drunk and stupid. That's a terrible combination of stereotypes right there, you know? The other problem, Gallagher, everybody wanted to know when I was a kid if, growing up, if my father was the guy who smashed watermelons with a sledgehammer. Yeah. Yes. Now, thanks to Shameless, everybody wants to know if my father's a drug addict from Chicago. I resent that. My father's a drug addict from New Jersey. Thank you. Glad everybody could chuckle at my childhood trauma there. Unfortunately, substance abuse does run in my family. Made me very nervous when I found out I was going to be a father. I had to make a conscious effort to make sure I was responsible about the way I abused substances. Well, no, for instance, I always took a taxi whenever I was too drunk to pick up the baby from daycare on my own, Some of you appreciated that. The daycare people did not. They pulled me to the side one day and they were like, Jim, we can smell alcohol on you. We know you've been drinking. I was like, well, you don't have to worry about it, ladies. I got a taxi out front. And they said, no, Jim, that's not the point. What happens if you go home and you pass out? The baby will be all on his own. Ladies don't have to worry about that. I scored some blow off the driver. I'm going to be up all night. I'm glad some of you found the humor in that. Those child services people did not. They were a tough crowd. Let's see, I moved down here about 20 years ago. I went to school at Coastal Carolina University. That's the biggest response I ever got for that. That must be because we were just in the College World Series. I don't know. Usually you don't get too much of a response when you say that you were a Chanticleer. I think that's because you're saying you were a Chanticleer. Nobody knows what the hell that is. Do you know what a Chanticleer is? It's a French chicken. Yeah, that's what it is. A committee got together at my school one day and decided, hey, what should we call ourselves? And somebody went I don't know, how about a Chanticleer? And somebody said, well, what the hell is that? And went, well, it's a French chicken. And then everybody went, yeah, all right, that'll work. What the hell is that? The Chanticleer. It would have been fine if we were just the French chickens. You know what I mean? That would have been A-okay. The problem is when you're the Chanticleers, you go to a visiting school stadium and you find out real quick that Chanticleer is easily turned into chanting queer. And that just takes the wind out of any cheering section right there, Things would go from bad to worse during the course of the game too. Halftime would happen. The other team's band would come out on the field. They'd have guys banging on drums. Our band would come out there, our guys would be banging each other. Yeah. Their band had guys playing flutes and trombones. Our guys were playing skin flutes and rusty trombones. It was rough. It was rough. The Chanticleers, the French chickens. Who wants to be the French anything, really? That's my question. Right, look at the University of Notre Dame, Notre Dame. They were founded by French Catholics back in the 1800s. What do they call their sports teams? You're not a big sports fan, I take it, are you? The Fighting Irish. Right, at a French school. They thought about calling themselves the Fighting French, and then they realized they'd surrender all their games at halftime. What terrible cultural appropriation that is for the French, I think, you know? They could have went with the happy Irish. They could have went with the lucky Irish. No. They want the Irish who were getting drunk at grandma's funeral and starting fistfights in the parking lot. They couldn't have gotten away with that with other nationalities, could they? It's okay to pick on the Irish, but you couldn't have taken an unflattering stereotype, mashed it together with a nationality, and ran that out there on a sports field, could you? Tune in this Saturday as the University of Stanford Chinese human traffickers take on the wife-beating Italians of Rutgers University. That's just the noon games. At 3:30, you got the incestuous rednecks of Tennessee taking on the jihadist Muslims of Michigan State. And then the big game at 8 o'clock, you got the number 1 ranked University of Miami, coke smuggling Cubans, taking on the number 3 ranked Arizona State, fence climbing Mexicans, all on ESPN. That's the Mexicans are the only ones I'm allowed to pick on? My God. White people are the worst. You really are. Let's see, is that what I got here? Yeah, yes, I see. Got a nice, mixed, diverse group of Western Europeans here tonight. That's always makes things lovely. Look at all the crossed arms. I feel like I'm going to get canceled. Do me a favor, go on to Yahoo News and let me know, because that's where you go. If you've been canceled, you find out on Yahoo News. They're canceling everything nowadays. You know, what the hell's the difference? They're canceling words. A friend of mine who sells real estate told me he's no longer allowed to refer to the big bedroom in the house as the master bedroom. They now want you to call it the primary bedroom. Yes, isn't this wonderful? At 44 years old, I got to remember to lock the door to my primary bedroom when I'm going to go, well, primary bait. That was really more of a litmus test than it was anything else, folks. Sense of humor is a sign of intelligence. That's all I'm going to say about the matter. All sorts of things getting canceled. Cartoons are getting canceled. They canceled Pepe Le Pew. They took Pepe Le Pew out of the last Space Jam movie. The complaint about Pepe Le Pew was that he normalizes sexual aggression toward women, which I happen to agree with. I think he does, but you know what? I don't think that's a reason to cancel him. I think that's a reason to keep him front and center and use him as a cautionary character. Right? Think about it. For generations, young women in this country grew up knowing that Frenchmen are basically a bunch of smelly rapists, Who's going to come up with a better metaphor than that to let everybody know? I knew we were all in trouble when they wanted to cancel Dr. Seuss. Yeah. The complaint about Dr. Seuss is that he's no longer considered inclusive because none of his books had gay or transgender characters in them, which I found to be a surprise because I always thought Walking in My Pocket was about a gay dude with a speech impediment. I just thought that was a tough criticism for the man. His job was to write children's books back in the 1940s. I don't think gay and transgender characters were really getting past Joseph McCarthy back then. He would have probably had some issues with that, but he was a liberal guy. If he were alive today, I'm sure he'd be happy to include everybody in his books. He wouldn't be able to pass up on the titles. Could have one for a transgender character called Here's a Who's a What Now? For gay dudes, you could have Pop. On Pop. I don't like that one. For lesbians, you could have One Fist, Two Fist, Red Fist, Blue Fist. And then around Christmas time, everybody would be able to pick up a copy of How the Grinch Stole My Spot on the UPenn swim team. No, listen, I joke around, but I have all the respect in the world for that Leah Thomas person, okay? She was knocking down barriers. She was actually nominated as Female Athlete of the Year by the NCAA a few years back, and I find that encouraging because I figure it opens the door for me to be Man of the Year for the NAACP. Think looking up here we can all tell that's long overdue? Wouldn't that be some shit? if I got nominated as Man of the Year by the NAACP and I actually accepted that, people would be like, man, that guy's got a huge set of balls to accept an award like that. Which incidentally was the same complaint about Leah Thomas. People were upset. They said because she was born a biological male that she had an advantage over the other female swimmers, but I don't think I buy that. Sure, she might have had stronger shoulders and bigger arms, but look, none of those other girls had to drag some giant lady dick in the water behind them. Think about how much that slowed things down. You guys have been spectacular. That's my time. I'm Tony Gallagher.